Okay, so today we are talking about choosing a place to call home. It's like what would be a place to call home, right? So the way that this actually factors into Judaism and the practice of Judaism is because the God of Israel spoke in a really sort of like, how should I say, this is a real talk kind of way with the Hebrews at the foot of Mount Sinai. And what the gist of the conversation is that he said, listen, you had a place in Egypt, you said you didn't like it, right? And then he said, these are the reasons you didn't like it, because you were working 7 days a week at hard labor, that they refused to acknowledge your rights as human beings, that they were killing you, raping you, and maiming you with impunity. They refused to teach you how to read and write. They didn't, basically recognize your right to enjoy or even know or understand their culture, their writings, and their ideologies. And basically, the only thing you were allowed to do was just make bricks. All the Hebrews were allowed to do was make bricks, make more Hebrews, eat, sleep, and shit. That's basically what they were allowed to do. They weren't allowed to do anything. All he said is, look, you had a place there, but you didn't like it. And you cried out to me, said you wanted to have a place of your own. So I'm going to give you a place of your own. These are the rules for how you must, basically manage the place that I will give you that is just for you, that where you will have autonomy. And the condition of that is that you must not subject other people to what you were subjected to in Egypt. If what you're saying is you didn't like that, okay, I brought you out with a mighty hand. Now, when you have autonomy in your own country, never do to other people what the Egyptians did to you, okay? That was the deal that they received. This idea of trying to figure out where you would call home. So what does that mean for humans in our modern time? Well, since I've been working on this Judaism for humans thing, it's like basically figuring out how do you basically liberate Judaism from bigotry and cultural, how should I say, differences, right? There's lots of kinds of Jews, right? The most recognizable version of a Jew is an Ashkenaz Jew. An Ashkenaz Jew is basically a white European Jew. That's what people think of when they see Jews, or when they think of Jews, is because that's what people know most about. They know about the Holocaust. They know all the pictures, these pictures from back in the day with people like, shivering in their pajamas at concentration camps with shaven heads, and people, being loaded onto trains, and all of the faces within those photos are faces that people associate with whiteness. So they think that Jews are white, when in actuality, the majority of Jews are people of color. There are Jews all around the world. And in actuality, in Israel, the majority of the people are people of color. And really and truly, many of the Israeli people are completely indistinguishable from Palestinians. The only way that you would know that someone was a Palestinian or someone was an Israeli is by the language they speak, and if they tell you. Each of those people would proudly tell you what they are. If you ask the person who said, are you Israeli or are you Palestinian? I'm Israeli. If you ask a Palestinian, are you Israeli or Palestinian? I'm Palestinian. What's the reason that there's so much division between Jews? It's because there's so many different kinds of ways and people that are within the Jewish community, and so many different ways of practicing that you wouldn't necessarily know, right? These things are based on cultural and national traditions and that kind of thing. It's the same sort of like ideas extruded through the experiences of the people and the cultures that are actually expressing it and practicing it, right? And for that reason, the differences in language and food, all kinds of things, cultural traditions, customs, historical events and things that matter to people and that kind of thing. How would you ever figure out how to bring all those people together? Israel has tried to bring all those people together within the scope of language. That's the reason that the language of Israel is Hebrew. Some people were like, well, the language of Israel should be what the majority of people speak In actuality, if it was what the majority of people spoke at that time, the people within the area that we call Israel today, Israel's language would be Arabic. How many regular everyday people would understand that? They'd look at the person and say, "Are you like, what are you?" And the person would be like, "I'm Jewish." And they're like, but what language do you speak? And they would say, "I speak Arabic." And they say, "Why do you speak Arabic?" They said, "Because I'm from a North African country that speaks Arabic." When they go to Israel, they learn Hebrew, right? How can these people who are so diverse and so different become one community? Only if they want to. And that's exactly what was going on in ancient Israel, is that God told the people that they would all become one nation, right? But it would be 12 tribes, or however many tribes you believe there were. Some people believe there were more than 12 tribes. Some people believe there were less than 12 tribes, right? But what the majority of people believe and are willing to accept is that there were 12 tribes, each according to his own standard. And today in Israel, that's actually practiced by many people who consider themselves to be dati, or like religious, right? Is that the Ashkenaz people tend to stay amongst themselves, and the Sephardics tend to stay among themselves. And anyone who practices in some kind of different way, or who's part of a different nationality group or ethnicity, they would stay amongst themselves, and they have their way of being Jewish. If you don't feel any particular affinity for some kind of ethnic group, like if you're not ethnically related to any particular kind of group or nationally related to any particular kind of group, how would you actually find a Jewish community? And what basically happens is that many Jews in Western countries don't ever choose any kind of community, and they just live as secular people and live independently. And that's okay too. And if you ask them, what's the reason that you're not actually affiliated with any particular community or something, they would say, because I just wasn't able to find a group of Jews that actually agree with what I believe and agree to practice in the way that I want to practice, and I don't want to offend anybody, so I just stay away from that. That would definitely make sense for me, in that although I have mystical Jewish beliefs, and I would consider myself to be Hasidish, I'm not willing to allow my life to be directed by the words of any rabbi. But I think what's more important about that is to understand how people can be sort of like unnecessarily marginalized by the community that they love. And the specific example of that would be, I had a friend in college when I was studying philosophy, when I graduated my bachelor's degree. She said that while she was at the Hebrew day school, she said the children were awful to her. They would ridicule her and tease her and bully her because she didn't speak Hebrew and she didn't speak English. And she said that she begged her mother to take her out of the day school. She said she couldn't stand it. And she didn't know anything about religious practice or anything. Now, what is it that happened there? Why were those kids so cruel to her? There's a whole sort of like world of Jewish bigotry that basically says that the sort of Jews that are valuable are white Jews, and that basically Jews of color are not valuable because they don't actually, assist all of the Jewish people in elevating their status in the world. Like basically, people of color are universally looked down upon. So we wouldn't want to encourage Jews of color to make themselves known. And the way that they justify it is to say, listen, this is a world that's based on racism and the elevation of those kinds of features. If we have Jews among us that have those kinds of features, we want to promote those people so that the world will think that we have status and power, as opposed to promoting what is actually true. And that's that majority of Jews are Jews of color, because then that will turn us into forever minorities. This is their belief. This is the way that they do things. So if we can understand that this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jewish girl from Russia could literally be driven out of the Hebrew day school because the children were so cruel to her, then do we really need to try to figure out how it could be true that a Jew of color would somehow feel unwelcome in a Jewish community? Of course we wouldn't be able to deny that that is obviously true. If a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Russian Jewish child could be driven out of a Hebrew day school, then we know for certain that Jews of color probably and usually are not necessarily made to feel comfortable in what we would believe are modern, sort of like egalitarian Jewish communities, right?